Hi everyone, welcome to Ricktopus. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue that Morty Smith is the most tragically written character in modern animation. Not because of one bad thing that happened to him, but because of what 8 seasons of compounding damage, parental neglect, emotional abuse, and stolen memories have slowly turned him into. By tracing Morty's journey from the anxious, stuttering kid we meet in the pilot, all the way through to the desensitized, violent, nihilistic teenager he becomes by Season 8, we can see how Rick and Morty quietly built one of the most honest and devastating portrayals of childhood trauma ever put on screen. And the worst part is that most of the people watching, just like most of the people in Morty's life, never even noticed it was happening. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. The boy before the storm. Who Morty was before Rick. To really understand how far Morty Smith has fallen, you first need to understand where he started. Because the Morty we see in later seasons, the one who goes on killing sprees and talks about how nothing matters, that version of Morty did not come out of nowhere. He was built, piece by piece, trauma by trauma, season by season. But before any of that happened, there was just a kid. A nervous, awkward, good-hearted kid who wanted nothing more than to fit in at school, and maybe, just maybe, get his crush Jessica to notice him. When we first meet Morty Smith in the very first episode of Rick and Morty, what we see is a 14-year-old boy who is, in every sense of the word, ordinary. He goes to Harry Herpson High School, he sits in math class, he falls asleep at his desk and has embarrassing dreams. He gets bullied by a kid named Frank who threatens him with a knife in the hallway. He has a stutter, he is scared of almost everything, and his biggest concern in life at this point is not saving the universe, or fighting aliens, or burying his own dead body in a backyard. His biggest concern is whether or not Jessica, the girl he likes from math class, even knows he exists. That is who Morty was. That is the starting point. And the reason it matters so much is because everything that happens after this, every single thing the show does to Morty across 8 seasons, only hits as hard as it does because we know who he was before it all started. Now, let us talk about what was already going on in Morty's life before Rick even showed up, because this is something a lot of people miss. Morty was not living in some perfect, stable household that Rick came along and destroyed. The cracks were already there. His parents, Beth and Jerry, were in a marriage that was falling apart long before Rick moved in. His father, Jerry, was insecure, struggling with work, and constantly looking for approval from a family that had very little respect for him. His mother, Beth, was a horse surgeon who felt like she had settled in life, trapped in a marriage she got into because she got pregnant with Morty's sister Summer at 17 years old. Beth's real dream was to be a real surgeon, not one who works on animals, and deep down, she blamed Jerry for holding her back from that. So right from the beginning, Morty is growing up in a house where his parents are quietly miserable. They stay together, but not because they are happy. They stay together because they feel like they have to. Morty's sister Summer actually puts it perfectly in the episode Rixty Minutes, when she sarcastically thanks her parents for the wonderful experience of being raised by 2 people who forced themselves to stay together instead of just being happy. That line cuts deep because it is exactly what Morty and Summer have been living with their entire lives. The tension, the arguments, the feeling that your family is always one bad day away from falling apart. And here is something that is really important to understand about Morty's personality at the start of the show. His anxiety, his low self-confidence, his constant second-guessing of himself, none of that came from Rick's adventures. Those traits were already there on day 1. The show actually tells us where they came from. In the episode Raising Gazorpazorp, Beth accidentally lets it slip that when Morty was a baby, Jerry filled him with his own insecurities. She says this almost casually, like it is just a known fact in the family that everyone accepts. Jerry's constant need for approval, his self-doubt, his fear of not being good enough, all of that got passed down to Morty before he could even walk. So when Rick Sanchez shows up and moves into the garage, he is not meeting a confident, well-adjusted kid. He is meeting a 14-year-old boy who has already been shaped by a household full of tension, a father who passed his own fears on to him, and a mother who, as the show makes clear over many episodes, is largely absent from Morty's day-to-day life. Beth believes that Jerry's way of raising Morty made him too soft, too anxious, too much like Jerry. But her solution to this is not to be more present or more supportive. Her solution is to step back and let Rick take over. Because in Beth's mind, Rick, the man who abandoned her when she was a child, is somehow a better influence on her son than his own father is. Think about that for a second. Morty's mom looked at her alcoholic, dimension-hopping, emotionally distant father and thought, yes, this is who should be spending time with my son. Not because Rick was safe,
Not because Rick was responsible, but because Beth was so desperate to keep Rick in her life after he had been gone for so long, and so afraid of Morty turning out like Jerry, that she was willing to put her son in real danger just to avoid that outcome. Dan Harmon, the co-creator of the show, actually talked about this in an interview. He explained that Beth would rather her son risk his life with her insane father than end up being like her husband. And that is one of the most heartbreaking things about the entire show. Because it means that from the very beginning, the adults in Morty's life were making choices about his future based on their own problems, not on what was actually best for him. Morty never asked for any of this. He never asked for a father who would fill him with doubt. He never asked for a mother who would choose her own father over her son's safety. And he certainly never asked for a genius grandfather who would drag him across the universe and treat him like a sidekick instead of a child. Now, the pilot episode gives us our first real look at what Rick's influence does to Morty in practice. Rick wakes Morty up in the middle of the night, drunk, barely able to stand, and drags him onto a flying car. Rick rambles about building a neutrino bomb and wanting to blow up the Earth and start over. He talks about saving Morty and his crush Jessica and restarting civilization from scratch. It is played for laughs in the show, but if you step back and look at it from Morty's point of view, his grandfather just pulled him out of bed at 2 in the morning, put him in a vehicle, and casually talked about ending the world. That is the very first scene of the entire series. That is our introduction to what life with Rick is going to look like. Later in the pilot, Rick takes Morty to a place called Dimension 35C to collect something called megaseeds. During this trip, Morty falls off a cliff because Rick did not properly explain how to use a pair of anti-gravity shoes he gave him. Both of Morty's legs break in multiple places. He is lying on the ground, screaming in pain, and Rick's first response is not to comfort him or say sorry. Rick's first response is to lecture Morty about not turning on the shoes the right way. Rick does eventually fix Morty's legs with a serum he gets from another dimension, but not before leaving Morty in horrible pain for a while first. And then, to get the mega seeds through interdimensional customs, Rick makes Morty hide the seeds inside his own body in the most humiliating way you can imagine. By the end of the pilot, Morty has been woken up in the middle of the night, heard his grandfather talk about destroying Earth, been taken to an alien dimension, had both his legs shattered, been forced to smuggle alien items inside his body, been shot at by customs guards, and been lied about by Rick, who told the family that Morty was the one who kept running away from school, not that Rick was the one pulling him out. The school discovers that Morty has missed months of classes. His parents find out, and Rick just casually tells Morty that this is how things are going to be from now on. Adventures forever. And what does Morty do? He goes along with it. Because what else can he do? His dad is too weak to stand up to Rick for more than a few minutes. His mom sides with Rick because she is terrified of losing her father again. And Morty himself, this anxious, unsure kid who has spent his whole life being told he is not smart enough and not good enough, suddenly has someone in his life who needs him. Rick needs Morty. Even if that need comes with danger and pain and fear, it is still more attention and more purpose than Morty has ever gotten from anyone else. And that right there is the beginning of everything. We see this pattern play out clearly in the early episodes of Season 1. In Lawnmower Dog, Rick goes inside Mr. Goldenfold's dreams to manipulate him into giving Morty better grades. On the surface, this looks like Rick doing something nice for his grandson, but the reason Rick does it is not because he cares about Morty's education. He does it because if Morty is failing school, Beth and Jerry might stop letting Rick take Morty on adventures. Rick is protecting his access to Morty, not protecting Morty himself. Then, in Me Seeks and Destroy, we get one of the most important early episodes for Morty's character.
The episode opens with Morty and Rick returning from an adventure that has clearly left Morty shaken. Morty is done. He tells Rick that the adventures are too dangerous, too scary, and too messed up. He wants to lead one himself, something simple and fun, like a fairy tale. Rick agrees, but only as a bet. If Morty's adventure goes well, he gets to pick every 10th adventure. If it goes badly, he can never complain again. Morty chooses a fantasy world. He wants the kind of adventure you read about in storybooks, giants and beanstalks and villages that need saving. And for a while, it actually seems to go okay. They help some villagers, they climb a beanstalk, a giant accidentally dies, they get put on trial but get set free. It looks like Morty might actually win the bet. But then something terrible happens. While Rick is playing cards in a tavern, Morty goes to the bathroom and is attacked by a character called King Jellybean. This creature tries to assault Morty in the bathroom. Morty fights him off, slamming a toilet seat on the creature's head over and over, and escapes. But when he comes out of that bathroom, he is a different kid than the one who walked in. He is shaking. He is barely holding it together. He tells Rick he wants to go home. He is willing to lose the bet. He does not care anymore. He just wants to leave. And this is one of the first moments in the show where we see Rick actually notice that something is deeply wrong with Morty. Rick looks over, sees King Jellybean coming out of the bathroom all bruised up, and puts it together. He does not say anything to Morty about it. Instead, he quietly gives Morty the win. He lets Morty feel like the adventure was a success by giving the gold he won to the villagers. And then, as they are leaving through a portal, Rick opens the portal one more time, reaches back through, and shoots King Jellybean dead. It is one of the rare moments in the early show where Rick does something purely to protect Morty. No jokes, no sarcasm, no lessons. Just a grandfather quietly getting revenge for what happened to his grandson. And the fact that Rick does not tell Morty about it makes it even more meaningful. He does not want credit. He just wants that thing dead. But here's what makes this moment so sad when you look at it in the bigger picture. This is Season 1, Episode 5. Morty has only been on a handful of adventures at this point, and he has already been physically broken, emotionally manipulated, and now personally violated. He is 14 years old, and the only adult who noticed what happened to him, the only one who did anything about it, is the same person who puts him in danger every single day. That is the trap Morty is caught in from the very beginning. Rick is both the source of his pain and the only person who seems to care when he is hurting. His parents are too caught up in their own problems to see what is happening to their son. Beth is focused on keeping Rick happy. Jerry is focused on not being left behind, and Morty is right there in the middle of it all. A kid with no real support system, slowly learning that the world is much darker and much more painful than he ever imagined. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And this is just the beginning. This is Morty before the real damage starts, before he buries his own body, before he watches entire worlds die, before Rick starts erasing his memories. Everything we have talked about in this section, the anxious kid, the broken home, the early adventures that push him to his limits, all of this is just the foundation, the groundwork, the version of Morty that still believes things can be okay. Because in the very next episode, something happens that changes Morty forever. Something so big, so disturbing, and so permanent that he will carry it with him for the rest of the series. And it all starts with a love potion. Section 2. Burying Yourself Alive. Rick Potion number 9 and the Death of Innocence. If there is one single episode of Rick and Morty that changes everything, one moment where the show stops being just a funny cartoon and becomes something much darker and much more real, it is Season 1, Episode 6. Rick Potion number 9. This is the episode where Morty's childhood, whatever was left of it, officially ends. Not with a dramatic speech or a big battle or some villain doing something evil. It ends with a 14-year-old boy standing in a backyard with a shovel, burying his own dead body in the dirt, and then walking inside to sit on a couch with a family that is not really his. But to understand why this moment hits so hard, we need to go through exactly how Morty gets there, because it does not happen all at once. It builds, slowly, painfully. And the worst part is that the whole thing starts because of something completely normal, something that any kid Morty's age might feel. Morty has a crush on Jessica. We have known this since the pilot. She is this girl in his math class, popular, pretty, completely out of his league, at least in his mind. Morty barely has the courage to talk to her. He stumbles over his words. He daydreams about her during class. He is, in every way, just a regular teenage boy who likes a girl and has no idea how to tell her. So when the school dance comes around, Morty does something that sets the entire disaster in motion. He goes to Rick and asks him to make a love potion, something that will make Jessica fall in love with him. Now, this is obviously a terrible idea. Morty is asking his grandfather to take away someone's free will so that she will like him. And that is worth pointing out because the show does not let Morty off the hook for it. This was his choice, his request. But Rick, instead of saying no, instead of being the adult and telling his 14-year-old grandson that this is wrong, just goes ahead and makes the potion. He whips something up from animal DNA and hands it over like it is nothing. Morty gives the potion to Jessica at the dance, and at first it seems to work. She is suddenly interested in him. But there is a problem nobody saw coming. Jessica has the flu. And because the love potion is based on the flu virus, it goes airborne. It spreads. Within minutes, it is not just Jessica who is in love with Morty. It is everyone at the school. Then everyone in town. Then everyone on Earth. Every single person who is not genetically related to Morty is now obsessively, dangerously in love with him. People are fighting over him, rioting for him. The entire planet descends into chaos because of a teenage crush and a grandfather who could not be bothered to think about the consequences. Rick tries to fix it. He makes an antidote using different animal DNA, this time from praying mantises. But the antidote does not work the way it is supposed to. Instead of curing people, it makes things worse. Now everyone on Earth is mutating into these horrifying praying mantis creatures who want to mate with Morty and then eat him. The situation goes from bad to unbelievable. Rick tries again. He makes another fix. And this time, the results are even more horrifying. Every person on the planet, every human being who is not related to Morty, transforms into these grotesque, twisted, monstrous creatures. The show calls them Cronenbergs, named after a real filmmaker known for making body horror movies. These are not people anymore. They are fleshy, screaming, unrecognizable monsters stumbling around a world that has completely fallen apart. Cities are destroyed. Society is gone. Civilization is over. And all of this happened because Morty liked a girl and Rick did not say no. Now here is where the episode takes its darkest turn. Rick does not fix it. He does not try again. He does not pull out some last-minute invention and save the day. Instead, Rick tells Morty that this world is done. There is nothing they can do. But Rick, being Rick, has a backup plan. He has been scanning other dimensions, and he has found one where another version of Rick and Morty actually did manage to cure the virus and save everyone. The only catch is that in this other dimension, that Rick and Morty died in an accident in the garage right after saving the world. So there is an opening, a slot they can fill. Rick opens a portal. He and Morty step through into this other dimension. And when they arrive in the garage of this other Smith household, what Morty sees is something no kid should ever have to see. 2 dead bodies, his own body and Rick's body, lying on the garage floor, blown apart from an explosion, blood everywhere, pieces of themselves scattered across the room. Rick barely reacts. He tells Morty to grab a shovel. They go to the backyard, and they dig. They dig 2 graves, and Morty, this 14-year-old boy who just wanted a girl to like him, buries his own dead body in the ground. He puts dirt over the face of another version of himself. He pats it down, and then he walks inside the house. The scene that follows is one of the most powerful moments in the entire series. Morty walks through the door. He looks around. Everything looks the same. The living room, the furniture, the TV. His family is sitting there. Beth, Jerry, Summer, talking and laughing like nothing happened. Because for them, nothing did happen. There, Rick and Morty saved the world and died.
And now a different Rick and Morty have quietly taken their place. Nobody knows. Nobody can tell. Morty sits down on the couch. He does not say anything. He just stares. His face is completely blank. Not angry, not crying, just empty. The camera holds on him as the song "Look On Down from the Bridge" by Mazzy Star plays in the background. And the episode ends. There is no joke at the end. No funny button to lighten the mood. Just a boy sitting in a house that is not his, with a family that is not his, trying to figure out how to keep living after what he just did. He left his real family behind in a world full of monsters. His real Jessica, his real Summer, his real Beth and Jerry, they are all still back in the Cronenberg dimension, abandoned, and there is nothing he can do about it. This is the moment that breaks Morty, not just in terms of the story, but in terms of who he is as a person. Because up until this point, Morty was scared, and he was anxious, and he had been through some rough stuff, but he still had a framework for reality. He still believed that there was a home to come back to, a family that was his, a world that was real. Rick Potion number 9 takes all of that away. It teaches Morty something that no child should ever have to learn, that you are replaceable. That your world can end and someone else can just step into your shoes and nobody will notice the difference. And we actually see the impact of this lesson 2 episodes later, in Rixty Minutes. In that episode, Summer is having a breakdown. She has just found out that she was an unplanned pregnancy and that her parents considered not having her. She is upset. She feels like she should not exist. She is sitting on the stairs, crying, ready to run away from home. And Morty walks over to her. He does not panic. He does not try to cheer her up with some happy speech. Instead, he takes her outside to the backyard and shows her something. He points at the ground and tells her that there, right there, are the graves of another Rick and another Morty. He tells her that he and Rick are not from this dimension, that they came here from somewhere else, that the Morty she grew up with is dead and buried right under her feet, and she has been living with a replacement this whole time without even knowing it. And then Morty says the line that has become one of the most famous quotes in the entire show. He tells Summer that nobody belongs anywhere, nobody exists on purpose, and everybody is going to die. And then he says, "Come watch TV." Now, a lot of people hear that line and think it is meant to be wise, like Morty has figured something out, like he has reached some deep understanding about life. But that is not what is happening here. What is actually happening is that a 14-year-old boy who has been through something so horrible that he cannot process it is repeating the only lesson he has learned so far. Nothing matters. Nothing is permanent. You cannot hold on to anything because it can all be taken away in an instant. So why bother feeling anything at all? Just sit down, watch TV, stop caring. That is not wisdom. That is a trauma response. That is a child shutting down because the weight of what he has experienced is too heavy for him to carry. And the really sad part is that nobody around him sees it for what it is. Summer hears it, and it actually comforts her. She sits down, she watches TV, and the moment passes. But Morty is not comforted. Morty is not at peace. Morty is just numb. He has taken the first step down a very long road,
And that road leads straight to the cold, detached, sometimes violent person he becomes in later seasons. Let us also talk about something the show does not address directly, but is impossible to ignore. Morty left his real family behind. His original mother, father, and sister are still alive in the Cronenberg world. They are surviving in a wasteland of mutated creatures. When we see them again in the Season 3 premiere, The Rick Shank Redemption, they have turned into hardened, feral survivors. They are wearing makeshift armor. They are killing Cronenbergs to stay alive. And when Summer and Morty from the current dimension show up looking for help, the original family does not welcome them. They are hostile, angry, hurt. Because from their point of view, Rick and Morty abandoned them. They left without saying goodbye. They chose to save themselves instead of staying and fighting. And Morty knows this. He knows that somewhere out there, the people who were really his family are suffering because of what he and Rick did. He carries that weight. Maybe not every day, maybe not in every episode, but it is always there. It comes up again in Season 6 when the portal gun resets and sends everyone back to their original dimensions. Morty gets sent back to the Cronenberg world. He has to face it again. The place he ran from. The world he helped destroy. That is the thing about Rick Potion number 9 that makes it so important to Morty's story. It is not just one bad day. It is a wound that never heals. Every time Morty looks at his family, some small part of him knows that these are not really his people. Every time he walks through the house, some part of him remembers that there is another version of himself rotting in the backyard. And every time something terrible happens on one of Rick's adventures, Morty has a little less reason to be shocked, a little less reason to care. Because the worst thing that could possibly happen to him already happened. In Season 1, Episode 6. He lost his world. He buried himself. And nobody helped him deal with it. The show does not give Morty a therapist after this. It does not give him a heart-to-heart with his parents. It does not give him time to grieve or process or heal. It just moves on to the next episode. And so does Morty, because that is what Rick has taught him. When things go wrong, you do not fix them. You do not face them. You just move on to the next reality and pretend everything is fine. And that lesson, that terrible, destructive lesson, is going to shape everything Morty does from this point forward. It is going to change how he sees the world, how he treats people, and how he handles pain. Because once you have learned that nothing is permanent and everything can be replaced, it becomes very hard to care about anything at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the damage from Rick's adventures is only half the story. Because Morty was already cracked before Rick ever took him through a portal, his home life, the one with Beth and Jerry and their falling apart marriage, had already laid the groundwork for everything that comes next. And to really understand why Morty was so easy to break, we need to look at the house he grew up in and the parents who were supposed to protect him. Section 3. The House That Broke Him. Beth, Jerry, and Parental Neglect. When people talk about why Morty is the way he is, they almost always point to Rick. And that makes sense. Rick is the one who drags Morty across the universe. Rick is the one who puts him in danger. Rick is the one who breaks him down episode after episode. But if we only focus on Rick, we miss something really important. Because before Rick ever moved into that garage, before Morty ever stepped through a portal, there were two other people in his life who were supposed to keep him safe. Two people whose entire job was to raise him, protect him, and give him a stable place to grow up. His parents, Beth and Jerry Smith. And when you look closely at what those two actually gave Morty, what you find is not abuse in the loud, obvious sense. What you find is something quieter, something that is almost worse because it is so easy to miss. What you find is neglect. Let us start with Jerry, because Jerry is the easier one to understand. Jerry Smith is, by his own admission, and by the way every other character treats him, a deeply insecure man. He is not evil, He is not cruel. He is actually, in his own clumsy way, someone who wants to be a good father and a good husband. But wanting to be those things and actually being those things are two very different situations. Jerry got Beth pregnant when they were both in high school. They were teenagers. They were not ready. And instead of growing into the role over time, Jerry kind of just froze in place. He never built a real career. He worked at a low-level advertising agency until he got fired for being bad at his job. He is constantly looking for approval from his wife, from his kids, from literally anyone who will give it to him. And when he does not get that approval, he sulks, he guilt trips, and he makes everything about himself. Now, here's the thing about Jerry that directly connects to Morty. In the episode Raising Gazorpazorp, Beth says something that is easy to miss, but is actually one of the most important lines in the entire show when it comes to understanding Morty's personality. She says that when Morty was a baby, Jerry filled him with his own insecurities. She does not say this like it is a big revelation. She says it like it is just a fact. Like everyone in the family already knows this and has accepted it. Jerry's fear, Jerry's self-doubt, Jerry's constant feeling of not being good enough, all of that got poured into Morty when he was too young to push it away. Think about what that means. Before Morty could even form his own thoughts about himself, his father was already shaping how he would see the world. Every time Jerry doubted himself, every time Jerry needed someone else to tell him he was okay, every time Jerry made his own weakness the center of attention, Morty was right there, absorbing all of it. And by the time Morty was 14 and we meet him in the pilot, those insecurities are baked into who he is. His stutter, his anxiety, his constant second-guessing, his automatic assumption that he is the dumbest person in any room. None of that came from Rick. All of that came from growing up with Jerry. And what makes this even worse is that Jerry does not even realize he did it. He is not self-aware enough to understand that his own issues have become his son's issues. Jerry thinks he is a good dad. He tries to connect with his kids. He tries to be involved. But his version of being involved usually means forcing his interests onto people who do not share them, or fishing for compliments, or making situations about his own feelings instead of the feelings of the people around him. In the episode Childrick of Mort, he drags Morty and Summer on a camping trip and tries to push his hobbies onto them even though neither of them wants to be there. Summer actually tells him to his face that he forces his interests on his kids just to feel important. And Jerry does not really hear it. He cannot. Because hearing it would mean accepting something about himself that he is not ready to face. So that is what Jerry gave Morty. Not violence, not cruelty, just a constant, quiet drip of insecurity that soaked into Morty's personality before he was old enough to fight it off. Jerry taught Morty that the world is scary, that you are probably not good enough, and that the best you can hope for is that someone will feel sorry for you. Those are terrible lessons to learn as a child, and they are the reason Morty was already so vulnerable when Rick showed up. Now let us talk about Beth. Because Beth is more complicated than Jerry, and in some ways, what she does to Morty is harder to see, but cuts even deeper. Beth Smith is Rick Sanchez's daughter, and that one fact explains almost everything about her. Rick left Beth when she was young. He disappeared from her life for years. The show reveals over multiple seasons that Rick's absence destroyed Beth in ways she has never fully dealt with. She grew up without her father. She idolized him from a distance. She built him up in her mind as this brilliant, larger-than-life figure who was too important for normal life. And when Rick finally came back and moved into her house, Beth latched onto him with everything she had. She was not going to let him leave again, no matter what it cost. And this is where Morty gets hurt. Because Beth's need to keep Rick in her life overrides almost everything else, including her responsibilities as a mother. The show makes this pretty clear across multiple episodes. Beth knows that Rick takes Morty on dangerous adventures. She knows that Morty misses school because of Rick. She knows that her son comes home scared, hurt, and shaken on a regular basis. And she allows it to continue. not because she does not care about Morty, but because she cares about keeping Rick around more. The Rick and Morty wiki actually states this directly. It says that Beth is largely absent from Morty's life because she believes that Jerry's overly nurturing way of raising him is what made Morty so anxious and insecure. So instead of stepping in and being more present for her son, Beth pulls back. She lets Rick fill the gap. She convinces herself that Rick is teaching Morty valuable life skills, that Rick is making him tougher, that Rick is the friend Morty does not have at school. And in doing this, Beth hands her son over to a man who, as we covered in the last two sections, is actively putting him in situations that no child should ever be in. Dan Harmon, the co-creator of Rick and Morty, actually spoke about this in an interview. He explained Beth's thinking in a way that is both honest and really disturbing. He said that Beth would rather have her son risk his life with her insane father than end up being like her husband. Read that again. Beth looks at the two male role models in Morty's life, a reckless, alcoholic genius and a harmless but insecure husband, and she picks the dangerous one. She would rather Morty be in physical danger every day than grow up to be like Jerry. That is how deep her issues with Jerry go, and that is how little she is thinking about what Morty actually needs. And it gets worse, because Beth does not just passively allow Rick to take over Morty's life. She actively sides with Rick in almost every conflict. In the pilot, when Jerry tries to stand up and say that Rick is a bad influence on Morty, that Morty is missing school, that this is not okay, Beth shuts him down. She defends Rick. She makes Jerry feel stupid for even bringing it up. And this pattern repeats over and over throughout the series. Every time Jerry raises a concern about Morty's safety, Beth dismisses it. Every time there's a choice between supporting her husband's worries and supporting her father's adventures, Beth picks her father. Now, there is one episode that really lays bare just how messed up this family is, and it is one that a lot of people do not think about in terms of Morty's story. It is Season 3, Episode 9, The ABCs of Beth. In this episode, Rick takes Beth back to a place called Frubyland, a pocket dimension that Rick created for Beth when she was a little girl. It was supposed to be a safe, fun world for her to play in, but we learn that young Beth was not the sweet kid everyone assumed she was. She trapped her childhood friend Tommy inside Frubyland and left him there. She asked Rick to make dangerous weapons for her as toys. She showed signs of being genuinely cruel even as a child. Rick tells Beth straight out that she was basically a young version of him, smart, dangerous, and without much care for the people around her. And here is the thing that connects all of this back to Morty. If Beth inherited Rick's coldness, and if Jerry filled Morty with his insecurities, then Morty is caught between two forces that are both pulling him apart. He has a mother who is emotionally distant because she is too busy chasing her father's approval, and a father who is emotionally smothering, but in all the wrong ways. Neither one of them is actually looking at Morty and seeing what he needs. There is a scene in Season 3, Episode 4, Vindicators 3, The Return of Worldender, where Morty has a moment that tells you everything about how he sees his family. But even more telling is a moment in The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy from that same season. In this episode, Morty believes Jerry might be thinking about hurting himself after the divorce, so Morty forces Rick to take Jerry on some kind of outing to cheer him up. But later in the episode, Morty has a phone call with his mom where he completely loses his cool. He tells Beth that she is just as arrogant as Rick. He tells her that she sucks up to Rick and it drives everyone else away. He is angry. He is hurt. And for the first time, he is saying out loud what he has probably been feeling for years. That outburst is not the rambling of a kid who does not know what he is talking about. That is a kid who has been watching his mother choose someone else over him for his entire life and has finally had enough. Morty sees the pattern. He sees that Beth puts Rick first, that she dismisses Jerry, and that she does not really show up for her own children the way she should. And the fact that Morty can see all of this so clearly tells us something important. He is not as clueless as everyone thinks he is. He understands his family. He understands what is broken. He just cannot fix it. And that is the real tragedy of Morty's home life. It is not that his parents are monsters. They are not. Jerry loves his kids in his own limited way. Beth loves her kids too, even if she does not always show it well. But love without action is just a feeling. It does not protect anyone. It does not create safety. And for Morty, growing up in that house meant growing up in a place where the people who were supposed to be his foundation were too wrapped up in their own pain to notice his. Jerry was too busy feeling sorry for himself to give Morty confidence. Beth was too busy chasing Rick's approval to give Morty attention. And together, they created an environment where Morty learned very early on that he was not the priority. He was not the center of anyone's world. He was just kind of there, floating between a father who could not stand on his own 2 feet and a mother who was always looking at someone else. This is why Rick was able to step in so easily. This is why Morty became so attached to Rick so fast. Because when you are a kid and nobody at home is really paying attention to you, and then suddenly this larger-than-life person shows up and says he needs you, that he cannot do what he does without you, that you are the Mortiest Morty, of course you are going to follow that person anywhere, even into danger, even into pain, even across dimensions where you have to bury your own body. Morty did not get pulled into Rick's world just because Rick is powerful or persuasive. Morty got pulled in because his parents left the door wide open. They created a gap in his life, a gap shaped like safety and attention and purpose, and Rick walked right through it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And once Rick was in, once he had Morty going on adventures and depending on him and seeing him as the most important person in his life, that is when the real damage started. Because Rick Sanchez is a lot of things. A genius, a survivor, a man who has lost everything. But one thing he is not, and one thing he has never been, is safe. And the ways that Rick hurts Morty, the ways he manipulates him, controls him, and slowly reshapes him into something darker, that is a story that goes far beyond broken legs and buried bodies. Section 4. The smartest man in the room is the most dangerous. Rick's emotional abuse. So far, we have talked about who Morty was before the show started, how burying his own body changed him forever, and how his parents created the conditions that made him easy to break. But now, we need to talk about the person who actually does most of the breaking. The person who is there for almost every single one of Morty's worst moments. The person who causes half of them, and then convinces Morty that none of it is a big deal. We need to talk about Rick Sanchez. Because as much as Beth and Jerry failed Morty by not paying attention, Rick fails him in a completely different way. Rick pays plenty of attention to Morty. The problem is what he does with that attention. Rick Sanchez is the smartest being in the universe. The show makes this clear over and over again. He can build anything, travel anywhere, outsmart anyone. There is no problem Rick cannot solve if he actually wants to solve it. And that is exactly what makes him so dangerous to Morty. Because when someone that smart decides to manipulate you, you do not even realize it is happening. When someone that powerful decides to control you, you cannot fight back. And when someone you love and depend on decides to hurt you, the pain goes deeper than anything a stranger could ever do. Let us start with the most basic and most constant form of damage Rick does to Morty, the way he talks to him. From the very first episode, Rick talks to Morty like he is stupid. He calls him an idiot, he dismisses his ideas, he rolls his eyes at Morty's feelings. He belches in the middle of conversations, like what Morty is saying is not even worth listening to. And this is not something that happens once or twice. This is every single episode. It is the background noise of their entire relationship. Now, some people watch the show and think this is just Rick being Rick. That is just how he talks to everyone. And that is partly true. Rick is rude to almost everyone. But there is a difference between being rude to a stranger and being rude to a 14-year-old boy who depends on you, looks up to you, and has nobody else in his life who makes him feel like he matters. When Rick tells Morty he is stupid, Morty believes it. When Rick dismisses Morty's opinions, Morty learns to stop having opinions. When Rick makes fun of Morty for being scared or emotional, Morty learns to push those feelings down and pretend they are not there. And this is happening to a kid who already came into this relationship with rock-bottom self-esteem. Remember, Jerry already filled Morty with insecurities. Beth already stepped back and stopped being present. So by the time Rick starts tearing Morty down with his words, Morty does not have any defenses left. He just absorbs it. Day after day, adventure after adventure, insult after insult. But the verbal stuff is just the surface. What Rick does to Morty goes much deeper than name-calling. Rick actively controls Morty's life in ways that Morty does not fully understand and cannot fight against. Let us go through some of the biggest examples. In the episode Lawnmower Dog, Rick goes inside Mr. Goldenfold's dreams and manipulates him into giving Morty A grades in math. On the surface, this looks like a nice thing. Rick is helping his grandson get better grades. But the real reason Rick does this has nothing to do with Morty's education. Rick does it because if Morty fails school, Beth and Jerry might try to limit how much time Rick can spend with Morty. Rick is not protecting Morty's future. He is protecting his own access to Morty. He needs Morty for his adventures. The show actually explains why in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. Rick tells Morty that every Rick needs a Morty because Morty's brainwaves act as a kind of camouflage. Morty's, as Rick puts it, low intelligence masks Rick's genius intelligence and keeps him hidden from people who are trying to track him. So Morty is not just a sidekick, he is a tool, a shield. And Rick needs to keep that shield close. Then there's the way Rick handles Morty's interests and passions. Every time Morty gets excited about something, every time he finds something he cares about that does not involve Rick, Rick finds a way to crush it. In Season 4, when Morty comes up with an idea for a heist movie, and Summer warns Rick that Morty could easily pitch it as a show and get attention for himself, Rick's response is to take Morty on an elaborate heist adventure specifically designed to drain all the excitement out of the concept. By the end of the episode, Morty no longer cares about heists at all. Rick killed his passion on purpose, just so Morty would not have something of his own that did not include Rick. The same thing happens with Morty's relationships. Almost every time Morty starts to connect with someone, especially a girl, Rick either directly sabotages it or creates situations that make it impossible. In the Season 5 premiere, Mort Dinner Rick Andre, Morty finally gets up the courage to call Jessica and ask her on a date. She says yes. This is a huge moment for Morty. After years of crushing on this girl, he is finally going on an actual date with her. But Rick has his own plans that night. He is having dinner with Mr. Nimbus, an old rival, and he needs Morty to keep bringing him wine from another dimension during the date. Every time Morty tries to focus on Jessica, Rick pulls him away. And because of the time difference between the dimensions, every quick trip Morty makes for wine equals years passing in the other world, creating an entire civilization that wants to kill him. The date falls apart. And worse, Jessica ends up getting sucked into another dimension where she spends what feels like thousands of years frozen in place, but fully aware of time passing. When she finally comes back, she is a completely changed person. She tells Morty she sees time differently now, and that they should just be friends. Morty's one shot at the relationship he has been dreaming about since the pilot is gone. And while Rick did not plan all of the specific ways it went wrong, he created the conditions that made it impossible. He put his own needs above Morty's happiness, like he always does. But if we are talking about the single clearest example of Rick deliberately hurting Morty, the one episode that lays it all out with no room for argument, it is Season 4, Episode 8, the Vat of Acid episode. This episode won an Emmy Award, and it deserves it. But not because it is funny. It deserves it because it is one of the cruelest things one character has ever done to another on television. Here is what happens. Rick and Morty are doing a deal with some alien criminals, and the deal goes bad. Rick's escape plan is to jump into a giant vat of fake acid and pretend to be dead. It works, but not smoothly. Morty has to blow their cover because the criminals take too long to leave, and Rick ends up having to fight his way out anyway. Afterward, Morty tells Rick that the acid vat plan was stupid. He says Rick never listens to his ideas and that he could come up with something better. Specifically, Morty suggests a device that would work like a save point in a video game. You press a button, and if things go wrong, you go back to that moment and start over. Rick gets angry, but instead of just arguing, Rick does something much worse. He builds the device. He gives it to Morty, and Morty starts using it. He uses it to pull pranks without consequences. He uses it to try different approaches with Jessica. He uses it to take risks he would never normally take. And then something real happens. Morty meets a girl. Not Jessica, someone new. They start a relationship. They fall in love. They go through ups and downs together. They survive a plane crash in the mountains. Morty chooses not to press the button because his last save point was before he met her, and going back would mean losing everything they built together. But then Jerry, being Jerry, accidentally hits the button. Morty is sent back to his last save point. The girl is gone. The entire relationship is erased. Morty is destroyed. He tries to find her again, to recreate what they had, but it does not work. You cannot force something like that to happen twice the same way. Morty goes back to Rick, heartbroken and defeated, and admits that Rick was right. Consequences matter. The device was a bad idea. He tells Rick that he learned his lesson, and then Rick tells him the truth. The device was never a save point. It never reversed time. What it actually did, every single time Morty pressed that button, was kill a Morty in another dimension and teleport our Morty into that dead Morty's place. Every reset, every do-over, every silly prank, another version of Morty died so that our Morty could try again. And Rick knew this the entire time. He built it this way on purpose. Not to teach Morty a lesson about consequences, Rick built it to punish Morty for saying the acid vat plan was stupid. That is it. That is the whole reason. Morty bruised Rick's ego, and Rick's response was to create a device that would make Morty responsible for the deaths of countless versions of himself across the multiverse. Let that sink in for a moment. A grandfather built a machine designed to psychologically destroy his 14-year-old grandson because the kid criticized one of his ideas. And Rick does not feel bad about it. When Rick reveals the truth, he is smug. He is satisfied. He proved his point. The acid vat was a better plan than anything Morty could come up with. That is all that matters to Rick. This pattern shows up again in the very first episode of Season 8, Summer of All Fears. In this episode, Morty and his sister Summer do something small and annoying. They keep taking Rick's phone charger without returning it. That is the offense, a missing phone charger. And Rick's response is to trap both of them inside a simulated reality, a fake world modeled after the Matrix, and leave them there for 17 years. 17 years of fake life. Summer becomes a ruthless business leader inside the simulation, and Morty goes to war. He fights in battles, he watches people die. He dies himself over and over inside this fake world. And when he finally comes out, he is not okay. He openly says he has PTSD. He has flashbacks. A shattered beer bottle triggers a panic response in him. He is so damaged by the experience that he steals Rick's death race car and tries to drive it into a nuclear power plant to knock out the entire power grid and make phone chargers useless. A phone charger. Rick inflicted 17 years of simulated war trauma on his grandson over a phone charger. And the worst part is that when it is all over, Morty and Summer choose to have their memories of the entire experience erased. They go back to being normal teenagers, carrying no memory of what happened. But Rick remembers. Rick knows what he did, and there is no sign that he regrets it. This is the cycle that defines Rick and Morty's relationship. Rick hurts Morty, Morty suffers. Sometimes Rick shows a tiny bit of guilt or affection, and then Rick does it again, over and over, across every season. The insults, the manipulation,
The sabotage of Morty's relationships and interests, the elaborate, disproportionate punishments. And through it all, there are just enough moments of genuine warmth, just enough times where Rick saves Morty's life or says something kind to keep Morty from walking away. In close Rick counters of the Rick kind, Rick starts crying while looking at his memories of baby Morty. In the Rick Shank Rickdemption, Rick dismantles the entire Galactic Federation, partly to get back to his family. In Fear No Mort, Rick keeps a photograph of Morty in his wallet. These moments are real. Rick does love Morty. That is not up for debate. But loving someone and being good for them are not the same thing. You can love someone and still destroy them. You can care about someone deeply and still be the worst thing that ever happened to them. And that is exactly what Rick is to Morty. He is the person who gave Morty a sense of purpose and belonging that he never got from his parents. And he is also the person who uses that bond to control, punish, and reshape Morty into whatever Rick needs him to be at any given moment. But there is one thing Rick does to Morty that might be worse than all the insults, all the punishments, and all the sabotaged relationships combined. It is something that goes beyond hurting Morty in the moment. It actually changes who Morty is able to become. Because Rick does not just damage Morty's present, he steals Morty's past. He literally reaches inside Morty's head and takes his memories away. And what that does to a person, especially a kid, is something we need to talk about next.
Section 5. The Boy Without a Past, Memory Erasure, and Arrested Development. Everything we have talked about so far, the broken home, the buried body, the insults, and the punishments, all of that is terrible. But there is something Rick does to Morty that might be the most damaging thing of all. It is not loud. It is not violent. It does not leave bruises or broken bones. But it cuts deeper than anything else because it attacks the very thing that makes Morty who he is. Rick erases Morty's memories. Not once, not twice. Over and over again, across years of adventures, Rick has been reaching into Morty's mind and pulling out the experiences that shaped him. And in doing so, Rick has taken away the one thing every person needs to grow up: the ability to learn from what has happened to them. We find this out in Season 3, Episode 8, Morty's Mind Blowers. The episode starts simply enough. Morty and Rick come back from an adventure involving something called a truth tortoise. Morty looks into the creature's eyes and sees some kind of deep universal truth that leaves him shaken and disturbed. He cannot handle it. He asks Rick to erase the memory, and Rick says sure, no problem, and takes him down to a hidden room in the garage. But when they get to this room, Morty discovers something he was never supposed to see. The room is filled, floor to ceiling, with glowing tubes, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each one contains a memory that Rick has removed from Morty's brain. Morty is stunned. He had no idea this room existed. He had no idea that Rick had been doing this for what appears to be a very long time. Rick starts showing Morty some of the memories. He puts them back into Morty's head, one at a time, using a special helmet. And what Morty sees is a parade of horrible things. Adventures gone wrong, mistakes he made, people he accidentally hurt. In one memory, Morty sees a smudge on a telescope and mistakes it for his new guidance counselor, Mr. Loonis, standing on the moon doing something suspicious. Morty's accusations lead to the real Mr. Loonis being publicly humiliated, and the man ends up taking his own life because of it. In another memory, Morty tells an alien warrior that there is no afterlife, and the alien, who is about to die in battle, is dragged screaming into what turns out to be a very real and very painful hell because Morty destroyed his faith at the worst possible moment. These are not small things. These are moments that would change a person forever. Moments that would teach you to be more careful, more thoughtful, more aware of how your words and actions affect other people. And Rick took all of them away. He removed them from Morty's mind like they never happened. But here is where the episode gets really dark. Morty notices that the glowing tubes are organized by color. Blue tubes are Morty's mistakes, pink tubes are family mistakes, and red tubes are Rick's mistakes. Morty's mistakes and the family's mistakes, those make some kind of sense to erase if you believe Rick is trying to protect Morty from pain. But Rick's mistakes? Rick has been erasing memories where Rick was the one who messed up, where Rick was the one who looked stupid or got things wrong. He has been removing those memories not to protect Morty, but to protect himself, to make sure Morty never remembers a version of Rick that is anything less than brilliant and in control. When Morty realizes this, he gets angry. Really angry. The two of them fight over the memory erasing device, and in the struggle, both Rick and Morty accidentally get their own memories wiped. They wake up in the room with no idea who they are, who the other person is, or how they got there. Morty, desperate to figure out what is going on, starts jamming memory tubes into his own head, one after another. He sees dozens of terrible things in rapid succession: death, failure, pain, guilt, more death. And it is too much. He cannot handle seeing all of this horror at once without any context or any way to process it. Morty snaps. He picks up a weapon and decides he wants to end his own life. And Rick, also with no memory of who he is, but seeing this stranger in the same amount of pain, decides to join him. The two of them sit there, weapons ready, about to go through with it. And that is when Summer walks in. She walks in like this is not the first time she has seen this. She looks at the situation, checks a set of written instructions that Rick apparently left for exactly this scenario, and calmly puts things back to normal. She has a set of backup memories that she injects into both of them. She drags them to the living room, she puts them on the couch. And when Rick and Morty wake up, they have no memory of anything that just happened. They think they fell asleep watching interdimensional cable. They yell at Summer for letting them sleep through it. And life goes on like nothing happened. But the most chilling part of this is Summer's reaction. She is not shocked. She is not panicking. She follows the instructions like she has done this before. And the episode makes it clear that she has. Rick planned for this. He has backup systems in place because this exact situation, where he and Morty lose their memories and nearly kill themselves, has happened multiple times before. The Oni Press comic books that tie into the show actually confirm this. Rick and Morty have gone through the Mind Blowers scenario more than once. This is a cycle. It keeps happening. And every time their memories get reset and they go right back to the beginning. Now let us talk about what this actually does to Morty as a person. Because the show does not just present memory erasure as a cool sci-fi concept. It actually explores what it means for Morty's ability to grow up. There is a moment in the episode where Morty, before things go sideways, asks Rick a question that might be the most important thing he has ever said. Morty asks something along the lines of whether maybe he would stop making so many mistakes if Rick just let him learn from them. That is it. That is the whole point. Morty is smart enough to realize that if you take away someone's memories of their failures, they are going to keep making the same failures over and over again. You cannot grow if you do not remember what went wrong. You cannot get better if every lesson gets deleted before it sticks. And Rick knows this. Mike McMahon, one of the writers of the show, said in a behind-the-scenes segment that Rick understands there are some experiences that are so big and so heavy that they do not help a person grow, they just destroy a person. So Rick takes them away. And on the surface, you could argue that Rick is trying to protect Morty, that he is doing a kind thing by shielding his grandson from memories that would break him. But that argument falls apart the second you remember the red tubes. Rick is not just removing the things that hurt Morty, he is also removing the things that make Rick look bad. He is editing Morty's entire perception of their relationship. He is making sure that Morty only remembers a version of Rick that is worth following, worth trusting, worth loving. That is not protection, that is control. Rick is deciding what Morty gets to remember and what he does not. He is choosing which experiences Morty is allowed to grow from and which ones get thrown away. And the result is that Morty is stuck. He is trapped in a kind of emotional childhood that he cannot escape because the experiences that would help him mature keep getting taken from him. One writer from Inverse magazine actually described it perfectly. They said that Morty's Mind Blowers gives us a clever explanation for why Morty never really grows up in the way you would expect. By having so many of his memories removed, Morty is in an emotional state of frozen development. He cannot change because the things that would change him keep getting erased. He is like a video game character who keeps getting sent back to the starting point every time he's about to level up. And the Nerdist wrote something that hits even harder. They described the episode as a window into how deeply and how regularly Morty experiences terrible trauma. The room full of glowing tubes is not just a collection of funny outtakes. It is a visual record of how much suffering this kid has gone through. Each tube is a nightmare. Each tube is something so bad that either Morty begged to forget it or Rick decided to erase it without asking. And there are hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all stacked up in neat little rows, color-coded and filed away, like Morty's pain is just data to be organized. Think about what that means for the Morty we see in the show. Every time he seems weirdly calm about something horrible, it might be because he has already been through something just as bad and had it wiped. Every time he seems like he should have learned a lesson by now but is not, it might be because he did learn it and Rick took it away. Every time he makes the same kind of mistake again, trusting the wrong person, following Rick into danger, not standing up for himself, it might be because the memory that would have taught him not to do that is sitting in a tube in a hidden room in the garage. And here is the other thing. Morty's mind is not meant to work this way. The show hints at this through the comics, where Morty actually wonders if his brain is trying to repair itself. He thinks that maybe his mind keeps reaching for memories that are not there anymore, trying to fill in the gaps, trying to make itself whole again. But every time it starts to heal, Rick comes along with a device and takes something else away. It is like pulling stitches out of a wound before it can close. The healing never finishes. The damage never gets fully processed, and Morty stays broken in ways he does not even know about. This is why Morty's Mind Blowers might be the most important episode in the entire series when it comes to understanding who Morty is and why he cannot seem to escape the cycle he is stuck in. It is not just about one bad adventure or one horrible day. It is about a pattern of systematic emotional damage that has been going on for longer than Morty can remember. Literally, because he cannot remember it. Rick has turned Morty's own past into something he does not have access to. He has made Morty dependent on Rick's version of events, Rick's version of their relationship, Rick's version of who Morty is. And as long as Rick holds the eraser, Morty can never fully know himself. He can never fully understand why he feels the way he feels, why he reacts the way he reacts, or why he keeps ending up in the same painful situations again and again. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So where does all of that pain go? If Morty cannot remember it, if it gets taken out of his conscious mind and locked away in a tube, does it just disappear? The answer, as the show makes very clear across multiple seasons, is no. It does not disappear. It goes underground. It buries itself somewhere deep inside Morty where even Rick's memory device cannot reach. And when it finally comes out, when all of that buried anger and hurt and frustration finally breaks through to the surface, what comes out is not sadness. What comes out is rage. Pure, uncontrollable, terrifying rage. And that is exactly what we need to talk about next. Section 6. The Rage Inside. Morty's Repressed Violence. At the end of the last section, we asked a simple question. If Morty cannot remember his worst experiences, if Rick keeps pulling those memories out of his head and locking them away in glowing tubes, where does all that pain actually go? Does it just vanish? Does it fade away like it never happened? The answer is no. It does not vanish, and it does not fade. it builds. It sits somewhere deep in Morty's body, somewhere below what he can see or name or understand, and it waits. And when it finally comes out, it does not come out as tears or sadness or a quiet cry for help. It comes out as violence, the kind of violence that shocks even Rick Sanchez. The Rick and Morty wiki puts it in very plain terms. It says Morty has repressed anger issues, and that these anger issues have caused him to become, and this is the exact wording, hysterical and homicidal. That is how the show's own database describes this 14-year-old boy. And the show earns that description through multiple episodes across multiple seasons, each one showing Morty's rage getting bigger, darker, and harder to control. The episode that first shows us what Morty is really carrying inside is Season 2, Episode 9, Look Who's Purging Now. Rick and Morty land on an alien planet that looks peaceful and old-fashioned, almost like a farming village. The people who live there look like cat people and speak politely. But there is one catch. Once a year, for one night, all rules go away. For that one night, anyone can do anything to anyone else. Steal, fight, kill. No punishment, no consequences. The locals call it the festival. It is basically a version of the movie The Purge, which the show openly makes fun of. Morty is horrified. He wants to leave immediately. This makes sense because at this point in the show, Morty is still trying to hold on to his sense of right and wrong. He still thinks violence is bad. He still believes in helping people. And when a young alien girl named Arthricia finds herself being chased by attackers, Morty insists that they save her. Rick does not want to get involved, but Morty pushes until Rick gives in. Things go badly. Arthricia steals their ship and shoots Rick in the liver, leaving Rick and Morty stranded on the planet during the festival with no way to escape. They are now stuck in the middle of a planet-wide killing spree with nothing to protect them. They take shelter in a lighthouse, where the owner makes them listen to his amateur screenplay in exchange for using his equipment to send a distress signal. Morty tries to be polite about the screenplay, but the owner keeps pushing him for his honest opinion. When Morty finally admits he did not like the story, the lighthouse owner kicks them out. By this point in the episode, you can feel Morty's frustration building. He tried to do the right thing by saving Arthricia, and she betrayed them. He tried to be polite to the lighthouse owner, and it blew up in his face. He is stuck on a planet where everyone is trying to kill him, Rick is hurt, and nothing is going the way it should. There is a fight brewing between Rick and an alien shopkeeper early in the episode, and Rick actually tells Morty something revealing. He says something along the lines of how everyone has violent urges, and that if Morty does not watch violent things, it is because he is afraid of his own basic instincts. Morty brushes this off. He does not believe he has those instincts. He thinks he is better than that. He is wrong. A rescue probe that Rick had called earlier finally arrives, and it lands right between them and a crowd of rioters. The probe assembles suits of flying, weaponized armor onto both Rick and Morty's bodies. Rick immediately starts fighting. He is used to this. For Rick, violence is Tuesday. But what happens to Morty is something else entirely. At first, Morty holds back. He does not want to hurt anyone. But as the crowd attacks them, as he takes hit after hit, something snaps. Morty finds what Rick calls his inner rage, and once it is unlocked, there is no putting it back. Morty does not just fight back, he goes on a rampage. He slaughters the entire mob. His suit plays the song Feels Good by Tony, while he tears through every person in his path. And the thing that makes this scene so disturbing is what happens after everyone is already dead. Rick finds the ship. The fight is over. They can leave. But when Rick turns around, Morty is still going. He is firing round after round into bodies that are already dead. He is killing people who are hiding. He is shooting at nothing. Even after every single person in the area has been killed, Morty keeps firing. Rick has to gently guide Morty back to the ship because Morty cannot stop on his own. This is not a boy defending himself. This is something that has been locked up for a very long time finally getting out. On the flight home, Morty is shaken. He is clearly ashamed of what he did. He knows that what happened was not normal. And this is where Rick does something that we will talk about much more in a later section, but I need to mention it now because it is so important to understanding the lie Morty tells himself about his own anger. Rick tells Morty that none of it was his fault. He says that the candy bar Morty ate earlier in the episode, which was given to him by a shopkeeper on the planet, contains something called purgenol, a chemical that makes people more violent. Rick tells Morty that the candy bar is what made him snap, that Morty is still the same person he always was, that nothing about who he is has changed. Morty believes him. He calms down. He accepts the explanation. And the audience might accept it too, if not for one tiny detail. As Rick tosses his own candy bar wrapper into the back seat of the ship, the camera zooms in on a sticker on the wrapper. The sticker reads, "Now purgenol free." There was no chemical. The candy bar had nothing in it. Morty's rage was real. It was all him. Every kill, every shot fired into a dead body, every second of that rampage came from inside Morty. And Rick knows it. Rick saw exactly what Morty is capable of, and instead of helping him understand it or deal with it, Rick lied. He gave Morty a comforting story that would keep the anger buried again, safely tucked away where Morty does not have to look at it. Now, you could look at Look Who's Purging Now and say, well, that was a one-time thing. Morty was in an extreme situation. Anyone would snap under that kind of pressure. And you would have a point if it only happened once. But it does not happen once. It keeps happening. In Season 3, Episode 1, The Rick Shank Rickdemption, Rick has been gone for months. He turned himself in to the Galactic Federation at the end of Season 2. The family has been struggling without him. When Rick finally comes back, he takes the family on what appears to be a normal outing. But when it looks like Rick might be threatening Summer's safety, Morty does not hesitate. He grabs a weapon and comes very close to killing Rick. His own grandfather. The boy who used to say, "Aw, geez," and follow Rick without question, is now willing to point a weapon at him to protect his sister. That is not anxiety. That is rage. Then there is Season 5, Episode 3, A Rick Convenient Mort. This is the Planetina episode. Morty falls in love with Planetina, an elemental superhero controlled by a group of ring bearers called the Tina Tears. When the Tina Tears refuse to let Planetina be free, Morty does not negotiate. He does not ask Rick for help. He handles it himself. And the way he handles it is horrifying. According to the Rick and Morty wiki, Morty killed the members of the Tina Tears to free Planetina. To one of them, Eddie, Morty bit off his finger and used the ring of fire against him, which led to his death. And then the wiki describes something that happens off-screen. Morty tore the flesh from another member's head and threw the skull at the remaining members before dealing with them by taking their rings. This is not a scared kid defending himself from monsters on an alien planet. This is a teenage boy walking into a room of human-like beings and brutally murdering them, one by one, because they were between him and someone he loved. The wiki also makes an interesting note about this pattern. It says that Morty most likely inherited this mental state from his mother, because Beth in childhood had sadistic tendencies as well. We talked about this in the section about Beth. Young Beth trapped her friend Tommy in Fruppyland. She asked Rick to make her dangerous weapons and toys. The capacity for this kind of violence is in Morty's blood. But what the show is arguing across these episodes is that having the capacity for violence is not the same thing as becoming violent. Something has to pull that capacity out of you. Something has to crack you open. And for Morty, the thing that cracked him open was years of accumulated trauma that he was never allowed to process, topped with memories he was never allowed to keep, living in a home that never made him feel safe, while being dragged through nightmares by a grandfather who calls him stupid and erases his pain. And then we get to Season 8, Episode 1, Summer of All Fears, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. After spending 17 years inside Rick's simulated reality, fighting in wars, watching people die, and dying himself over and over again, Morty comes out of the Matrix with what he openly calls PTSD. A shattered beer bottle triggers a panic response in him. He has flashbacks to the simulated war. And when the pain becomes too much, Morty does not cry. He does not ask for help. He steals Rick's death race car and drives it toward a nuclear power plant, trying to knock out the entire power grid so that phone chargers, the thing that started all of this, would become useless forever. That is not a rational response. That is not even a revenge plot. That is a kid who has been pushed so far beyond his breaking point that the only way he knows how to express what he is feeling is through destruction. The pattern across these episodes is clear. Season 2, Morty massacres a mob and cannot stop shooting. Season 3, Morty nearly kills Rick. Season 5, Morty tears people apart with his bare hands and stolen elemental powers. Season 8, Morty tries to destroy a power grid because a simulated war broke something inside him that he cannot fix. The anger gets worse every time. And every time, instead of being helped, Morty is either lied to, memory wiped, or left to deal with it on his own. But here's the part that makes Morty's story so much more painful than a simple tale of a kid who becomes violent. Because Morty does not want to be this person. After the purge, he is ashamed. After the Tina tears, the episode does not treat it as a victory. After the Matrix simulation, Morty does not brag about his war experiences. He is haunted by them. Morty knows, on some level, that there is something wrong with him. He just does not know why. He cannot trace it back to its source because half the memories that would explain it are sitting in tubes in Rick's garage. And this is what makes his character so heartbreaking. Because deep down, past all the rage and the violence and the growing coldness, Morty still thinks of himself as a good person. He still wants to be kind. He still believes in doing the right thing. But the show keeps asking a question that gets harder and harder to answer. How long can someone stay good when everything around them is designed to break them? Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next episode we need to look at answers that question in the most brutal and revealing way the show has ever attempted. Because in Season 3, Episode 6, the show literally rips Morty in half, separating the parts of himself that he considers good from the parts he considers bad. And what comes out of that experiment tells us more about who Morty really is than anything else in the entire series. Section 7. Toxic Goodness. What rest and Ricklaxation reveals about Morty's self-image. We have spent the last several sections building a picture of who Morty is becoming. We have seen the buried body. We have seen the neglectful parents. We have seen Rick's abuse, the stolen memories, and the violent outbursts that keep getting worse. But all of that tells us what is happening to Morty from the outside. What we have not really explored yet is what is happening inside Morty's head. How does he see himself? What does he think is wrong with him? And what does he believe makes him who he is? Season 3, Episode 6, Rest and Ricklaxation, answers all of those questions. And the answers are devastating. The episode starts with Rick and Morty coming back from what is clearly one of the worst adventures they have ever been on. We do not see the adventure itself, but we do not need to. The two of them stumble through a portal looking completely destroyed. They are screaming, they are panicking. Whatever happened out there pushed both of them to the edge. Morty is having what looks like a full breakdown, yelling about how they almost died and how he cannot keep doing this. Rick, for once, agrees that they need a break, so he takes them to an alien spa. At this spa, there is a machine that removes what the show calls your cognitive toxins. Think of it like a filter. It is supposed to pull out all the bad stuff inside you, all the parts of your personality that are holding you back or making you miserable, and leave behind only the good parts, the healthy parts, the version of you that can function without all the baggage. Rick and Morty step into the machine. It splits each of them into two separate beings. One version is their toxic self, containing everything they subconsciously consider to be bad about themselves. The other version is their healthy self, containing everything they believe is good. Now here is where the episode becomes one of the most important in the entire series for understanding Morty. Because what ends up in Morty's toxic half and what ends up in his healthy half is not what you would expect. And the difference between the two reveals something about Morty's inner world that is genuinely heartbreaking. Toxic Morty is a mess. He is anxious, stuttering, insecure, and constantly apologizing. He is the version of Morty that we met in the pilot episode, the scared kid who says, "Aw, geez," and flinches at everything. He is clingy and needy and terrified of being abandoned. He is also deeply empathetic. He cares about other people. He feels guilt when he does something wrong. He has a moral compass that points toward kindness, even when kindness is not the easy choice. Those are the traits that Morty considers toxic. Let that sink in. Morty believes that his anxiety, his empathy, his guilt, his desire to be good, and his need for love are the worst things about him. Those are the parts he wants removed. Those are the parts he thinks are holding him back. And then there is healthy Morty, the version of Morty that is left over after all those toxic traits are stripped away. And healthy Morty is terrifying. He is confident. He is smooth. He walks with his shoulders back and talks without a stutter. He goes up to Jessica at school and asks her out, and when the date does not go perfectly, he does not spiral into self-doubt. He moves on. He tells her something along the lines of how he would just get bored with her anyway. He starts picking up other girls. He becomes manipulative. He becomes cold. One analysis of the episode described healthy Morty as a manipulative womanizer who makes objectifying, sexist comparisons about women. This is what Morty thinks a healthy version of himself looks like. Not kind, not caring, not empathetic. Just confident, detached, and willing to use people. Healthy Morty is basically a younger, less drunk version of Rick. And that is not an accident. The show is telling us that after years of being told his feelings are stupid, after years of watching Rick succeed by not caring about anyone, after years of being punished for being soft and emotional, Morty has internalized the message. He now believes that the parts of himself that feel things are the parts that need to go. His goodness is his sickness. His empathy is his weakness. His love is his problem. The episode does something equally revealing with Rick. Toxic Rick is loud, angry, abusive, and cruel. He calls people terrible things. He lashes out. He is the version of Rick that most people would expect to land in the toxic pile. But toxic Rick also keeps something that healthy Rick throws away: his attachment to Morty. Toxic Rick still cares about Morty. He still wants to protect him. He still, in his broken and ugly way, loves his grandson. When Toxic Morty is in danger, Toxic Rick rushes to help him. He is horrible about it. He insults Morty while doing it, saying things like, "Quit your bitching, it's gonna be okay, Grandpa's here." But the love is real. Healthy Rick, on the other hand, feels nothing for Morty at all. When he steps out of the machine, he refers to his attachment to Morty as one of the toxic traits he got rid of, calling it his irrational attachments and crippling loneliness. Healthy Rick sees his love for Morty as a flaw, something that was making him weak, something that a truly functional version of Rick would not need. So what does this tell us? It tells us that in Rick's mind, loving Morty is toxic. And in Morty's mind, being the kind of person who deserves love is also toxic. Both of them, the grandfather and the grandson, have been so damaged by their experiences that they have come to see human connection and basic emotional warmth as diseases to be cured rather than qualities to be valued. For Morty specifically, this is the payoff of everything we have been talking about since Section 1. Jerry taught Morty to be insecure. Beth taught Morty that his feelings do not matter as much as keeping Rick around.
Rick taught Morty that being smart and detached is better than being kind and vulnerable. And after years of absorbing those lessons, Morty has reached a conclusion about himself that is as logical as it is tragic. The parts of him that care are the parts that keep getting him hurt, so those must be the broken parts. The episode does eventually put both versions of Rick and Morty back together. Healthy Rick realizes that even though he considers his attachment to Morty irrational, the healthy thing to do is to re-merge, because separating yourself from the parts of your personality that you do not like does not actually make you healthy. It just makes you incomplete. Rick convinces Jessica to help lure healthy Morty back, so they can put him back together with toxic Morty. And when the two Mortys are merged, regular Morty returns. Anxious, stuttering, empathetic, and whole. But the damage of the episode's revelation does not go away just because the characters are put back together. We now know something about Morty that we cannot unknow. We know that he hates the best parts of himself. We know that he considers his own kindness a burden. We know that if he could choose, if he really had the power to decide which version of himself to keep, he would throw away the scared, caring boy and keep the cold, confident manipulator. And that tells us exactly how far the trauma has gone. It has not just changed what Morty does, it has changed how Morty sees himself. The boy who started this show as an innocent, anxious kid with a crush on a girl in his math class now looks in the mirror and sees his own goodness as the enemy. His empathy is not a strength, it is a target on his back. His guilt is not a sign of moral character, it is a chain holding him down. His love is not something to be proud of, it is the reason he keeps getting hurt. This is what years of unprocessed trauma, erased memories, parental neglect, and Rick's constant emotional abuse have done to Morty's sense of who he is. They have turned him against himself. The scared little boy is still in there, still caring, still wanting to do the right thing. But Morty has decided that the scared little boy is the problem. And every season, he gets a little bit closer to burying that boy the same way he buried his own body in the backyard back in season 1. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And speaking of burying things, there is one more area of Morty's life where this pattern of hope and destruction plays out over and over again. And it might be the most painful one of all. Because every time Morty tries to find connection, every time he reaches out for love or companionship, or even just someone who sees him as more than Rick's sidekick, the universe finds a way to rip it away from him. And each time it happens, it takes a little more of that goodness with it. That is what we need to look at next. Section 8. Love as a weapon. How every relationship gets ripped away. In the last section, we saw what happens when you split Morty in half and force him to look at the parts of himself he considers broken. His empathy, his kindness, his need for connection. Morty thinks those are his worst qualities. And one of the biggest reasons he has come to believe that is because every single time he opens himself up to another person, every time he lets himself care about someone outside of his family, the universe punishes him for it. Not once, not twice, every single time. Morty's love life is not a series of normal teenage heartbreaks. It is a pattern of devastation so consistent that it starts to feel like the show is making a deliberate argument. This kid is not allowed to be happy. And every failed relationship pushes him a little further toward the cold, detached version of himself that rest and relaxation showed us he secretly wants to become. It all starts with Jessica. From the very first episode of the show, Morty has a crush on Jessica, a red-headed girl in his math class. She is the classic high school crush. Morty can barely talk to her. He stumbles over his words. He stares at her from across the room. She is nice to him when they interact, but she is mostly in her own world, dealing with her own boyfriend drama and her own life. For the first 4 seasons, Morty's feelings for Jessica are almost entirely one-sided. She barely knows he exists as anything more than a classmate.
But the crush matters because it represents something important. Jessica is Morty's dream of a normal life. She is not an alien. She is not from another dimension. She is just a girl at school. And wanting to be with her is the most normal, most teenage, most Morty thing about him. In a life filled with Cronenberg monsters and buried bodies and erased memories, Jessica is the one thing that feels like it belongs to Morty's actual age. She is his anchor to being a regular kid. And the show takes that anchor and destroys it in the most brutal way possible. In Season 5, Episode 1, Mort Dinner Rick Andre, Morty finally works up the courage to call Jessica and tell her how he feels. She says yes to a date. This is a moment the show has been building towards since the pilot. 4 full seasons of Morty wanting this girl, and she finally says yes. But Rick has plans that night. He is hosting a dinner for Mr. Nimbus, an old rival, and he needs Morty to keep running to another dimension to get wine for the dinner during the date. Every time Morty goes to this other dimension to get the wine, time passes differently there. A few minutes for Morty equals years for the people in that dimension. An entire civilization grows up around Morty's visits. They worship him, then they hate him, then they try to kill him. And while all of this is happening, Morty keeps running back and forth between his date with Jessica and this increasingly violent other world. The date falls apart. Nothing goes right. And by the end of the episode, Jessica gets pulled into the other dimension and is frozen in time, fully aware but unable to move for what feels like thousands of years from her perspective. When Jessica finally comes back, she is a different person. She has experienced so much time, so much existence, that she no longer sees the world the way a regular teenager does. She tells Morty that she now sees time differently, that she wants to find meaning and purpose in her existence. She declares herself a time god. And she tells Morty that they should just be friends. Not cruelly, not carelessly. She is kind about it. But the result is the same. The girl Morty has been dreaming about since he was 14 is gone. Not because she does not like him, but because Rick's world transformed her into something beyond a normal relationship. Rick did not plan for Jessica to become a time god, but Rick did create the conditions that made the date impossible. He prioritized his own dinner over Morty's one chance at the thing he wanted most. And that is the pattern. Rick's world keeps eating the people Morty cares about. The next big relationship Morty has is with Planetina in Season 5, Episode 3, A Rick Convenient Mort. Planetina is an elemental superhero, kind of like a parody of Captain Planet. She controls the elements through a set of rings held by a group of people called the Tina Tears. When Morty meets her, there is an instant connection. They are both idealistic. They both want to help people. And unlike Jessica, who is always distant, Planetina is fully present. She and Morty fall for each other fast and hard. For a brief stretch of the episode, Morty is genuinely happy. He is in love. He is smiling. He is acting like a regular teenager with a girlfriend for the first time in the entire series. But the Tina Tears control Planetina through the rings, and they refuse to let her go. Morty, driven by his love for her, and the repressed rage we talked about in the last section, brutally kills the Tina Tears to set Planetina free. He bites off one member's finger to get his ring. He uses the fire ring to burn another one alive. The violence is shocking, but Morty does it because he believes he is saving someone he loves. And then Planetina is free. And for one moment, it looks like Morty might actually get to keep something good. But Planetina, now freed from external control, follows her own beliefs about saving the planet to their extreme conclusion. She kills a group of people to stop environmental destruction. Morty watches the news report and realizes that the person he loves has become something he cannot support. Beth, in a rare moment of actual parenting, tells Morty that he cannot see Planetina anymore, and Morty agrees. He breaks things off. The final scene of their relationship is Morty sitting on his bed, sobbing. Not the quiet, numb crying of someone who is shut down. Real, ugly, heaving sobs. The kind of crying that comes from losing something that actually mattered. It is one of the rawest emotional moments in the entire series. And it hurts so much, because for once, Morty had something real. Planetina was not a one-sided crush. She loved him back. They understood each other. And it still got taken away. But maybe the most painful relationship Morty ever has is one where we never even learn the girl's name. In Season 4, Episode 8, the Vat of Acid episode, which we talked about earlier, Rick gives Morty a device that Morty thinks lets him save a point in time and go back to it whenever he wants. Morty uses the device to mess around, pulling pranks and testing different approaches with people. But then something real happens. Morty meets a girl at a coffee shop. They start talking. They go on a date. They start a relationship. The show gives us a montage of their time together, and it is beautiful. They go through everything a real couple goes through. Good times and bad times. Fights and makeups. They even survive a plane crash together in the mountains, huddling for warmth and helping each other stay alive. Morty chooses not to press the reset button because his last save point was before he met this girl, and going back would erase everything they built. This is the deepest, most meaningful romantic connection Morty has ever had. He chose her over the safety net. He chose the relationship over the easy way out. And then Jerry, his own father, accidentally sits on the device and hits the button. Morty is sent back to his last save point. The girl is gone. The relationship is erased. Not just from Morty's life, but from existence. He tries to find her again, tries to recreate what they had, but it does not work. You cannot force something like that to happen the same way twice. And then, as we covered earlier, Rick reveals the whole thing was a punishment. The device was never a time machine. It was killing alternate Mortys and dropping our Morty into their lives. Everything Morty experienced was real. The love was real. The plane crash survival was real. The loss was real. But Rick designed it all to teach Morty a lesson about criticizing his stupid acid vat plan. Put these three relationships together, and you see a pattern that goes far beyond bad luck. Jessica represents the dream that was always out of reach, and then transformed into something unrecognizable. Planetina represents real love that was destroyed by the violence of the world Morty lives in. The unnamed girl represents the deepest connection of all, erased by the carelessness of Morty's own family and the cruelty of Rick's ego. Every time Morty reaches out for love, the show cuts his hand off. And each time it happens, Morty learns the same lesson a little more deeply. Caring about people is dangerous. Opening yourself up gets you hurt. The safest thing to do is stop trying. And remember what we learned in Rest and Ricklaxation. Morty already considers his capacity for love and connection to be one of his toxic traits. These failed relationships are the evidence his subconscious is working from. Every time he loves someone and loses them, it confirms what he is starting to believe, that his toxic self, the one who cares and feels and needs people, is the one getting him destroyed. And his healthy self, the cold and detached version, is the one who would survive. This is how trauma changes a person's relationship with love itself. It is not that Morty stops wanting connection. He clearly does not. Even in later seasons, he keeps trying. He dates Jessica casually again in Rick Finding Your Mort. He falls for a girl named Elle later in the series. The desire for love does not die. But the belief that love will work out, the belief that he deserves it and can keep it, that belief gets smaller and smaller with every loss. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And through all of these losses, through every destroyed relationship and every stolen moment of happiness, there is one constant, one person who is always there, either directly causing the destruction or creating the world in which the destruction becomes inevitable. Rick Sanchez. And the way Rick handles Morty's pain after these losses, The lies he tells and the comfort he pretends to offer reveals something about their relationship that we have only touched on so far. Because Rick does not just hurt Morty, he convinces Morty that the hurting is not real. And that is what we need to examine next. Section 9. The purgenol-free lie. Rick's gaslighting and false comfort. Throughout this entire essay, we have been looking at the different ways Morty has been damaged. His parents neglected him. Rick abuses him. His memories get erased. His relationships get destroyed. His rage keeps building with nowhere to go. But there is one more layer to all of this that ties everything together, and it might be the most insidious one of all. Because Rick does not just hurt Morty. He then turns around and tells Morty that the hurt is not real. He rewrites what happened. He offers fake explanations. He gives Morty just enough comfort to keep him from asking the questions that would reveal how badly he has been betrayed. And every time Morty accepts one of these false explanations, he loses a little more of his ability to trust his own feelings. We already talked about the biggest example of this in the section about Morty's violence, but it is so important that it deserves to be the centerpiece of its own section. In Look Who's Purging Now, after Morty goes on a killing rampage so extreme that even Rick seems uncomfortable, Morty is sitting in the ship on the way home, clearly disturbed by what he just did. He is quiet. He is ashamed. He knows that something came out of him that should not have been there, and he needs someone, anyone, to help him understand what just happened. Rick sees this, and instead of being honest, instead of saying something like, "You have a lot of anger inside you, and we should probably talk about that," Rick invents a lie on the spot. He tells Morty that the candy bar he ate earlier contained a chemical called purgenol that makes people violent. He tells Morty that the rage was not his, it was the candy bar. Morty is still Morty. Nothing has changed. Morty believes him immediately. You can see the relief wash over him.
He does not want to believe that he is capable of what he just did. He does not want to face the possibility that there is something dark and violent living inside him that has nothing to do with chemicals or aliens or any outside force. So when Rick hands him an easy answer, Morty grabs it with both hands and holds on tight. But the camera tells us the truth. As Rick tosses his candy bar into the back seat, the wrapper flips over and we see the sticker. Now purgenol free. The candy bar had no violence-enhancing chemical in it. Rick made the whole thing up. And the audience knows it, even though Morty does not. This one moment captures the entire dynamic of Rick and Morty's relationship in a single scene. Morty experiences something real and painful. He looks to Rick for guidance. Rick tells him a comforting lie. There are infinite realities, infinite versions of everything, and this is just how things work sometimes. Move on. Rick does not sit down with Morty and help him process what just happened. He does not acknowledge that what they did, abandoning an entire dimension and taking over the lives of their dead alternates, is deeply messed up. He treats it like changing a flat tire, an inconvenience, a thing that happened, and by treating it that way, he teaches Morty to treat it that way too. Which is exactly how Morty ends up giving that famous speech to Summer 2 episodes later in Ricksty Minutes, where he says nobody belongs anywhere, nobody exists on purpose, everybody is going to die.
That speech sounds like wisdom. It sounds like Morty has figured something out. But as we discussed earlier, it is not wisdom. It is a coping mechanism he learned from Rick. It is the lie Rick told him, dressed up as a life philosophy. The same thing happens with the memory erasure. Every time Rick wipes Morty's mind in Morty's Mind Blowers, he's telling Morty, without words, that these experiences do not matter, that they can be deleted, that pain is not something you work through, but something you get rid of, like clearing old files off a computer. And Morty, who desperately wants the pain to stop, goes along with it. He asks Rick to erase his memories. He volunteers for it, because Rick has taught him that this is how you deal with things that hurt. You do not face them. You do not learn from them. You make them disappear. And then there is the Vat of Acid episode. After Rick reveals that the save device was actually killing alternate Mortys, after Morty realizes that his entire relationship with the unnamed girl was real, and that he is responsible for the deaths of countless versions of himself, Rick does not comfort him. Rick does not apologize. Rick is smug. He is satisfied because he proved his point. The acid vat was a better plan. That was the whole purpose of this elaborate, cruel experiment. Rick was right, Morty was wrong, and that is all that matters. Rick turns one of the most devastating emotional experiences of Morty's life into a lesson about respecting Rick's ideas. He takes Morty's grief and his guilt and his heartbreak and reduces them to nothing more than proof that Rick is smarter. And Morty, broken and defeated, accepts it. Because what else can he do? Rick is the smartest person in the universe. If Rick says the acid vat was better, then the acid vat was better. If Rick says the candy bar made you violent, then the candy bar made you violent. If Rick says do not think about the buried body, then do not think about the buried body. This is how someone's sense of reality gets slowly taken apart. Not through one big dramatic moment, but through hundreds of small ones. Every time Rick dismisses Morty's feelings, every time he offers a fake explanation, every time he treats a devastating experience like it is no big deal, he is teaching Morty that his own perceptions cannot be trusted, that what he feels is not what is actually happening, that the smartest person in the room has a better understanding of Morty's own inner world than Morty does. And the result is a kid who no longer trusts himself. A kid who second-guesses his own emotions. A kid who feels rage and immediately looks for an external explanation because Rick taught him that the rage cannot possibly be his own. A kid who feels sadness and pushes it down because Rick taught him that sadness is a waste of time in an infinite universe. A kid who feels love and braces for impact because experience has taught him that love always ends in loss. And Rick has taught him that the loss is just how things work. The purgenol lie is not just a funny twist at the end of a violent episode. It is the key to understanding how Rick maintains his hold on Morty across 8 seasons. Rick does not keep Morty loyal through kindness. He does not keep Morty close through shared respect. He keeps Morty by making sure that Morty cannot fully understand his own experience without Rick there to explain it to him. He keeps Morty by being the narrator of Morty's own life. And the saddest part is that Morty is aware, on some level, that something is wrong. He pushes back against Rick more and more as the seasons go on. He questions Rick's motives. He calls out Rick's selfishness. But he keeps coming back. Because when you have been told your whole life that your feelings are wrong, that your perceptions are off, that the smartest person in the room knows better than you do about what is happening inside your own head, leaving becomes almost impossible. You do not trust yourself enough to walk away. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. So if Morty cannot trust his own emotions, cannot keep his own memories, cannot hold on to the people he loves, and keeps being told that none of it matters anyway, what does that do to his view of the world over time? What happens to a kid who absorbs all of these lessons across 8 seasons? The answer is something the show has been building toward from the very beginning, and it shows up in one of Morty's most famous lines. That is where we are going next. Section 10. Nobody belongs anywhere. Morty's growing nihilism, season by season. There is one line from Rick and Morty that has taken on a life of its own. You see it on t-shirts, you see it in memes, you see it quoted in comment sections all over the internet, as if it is some kind of deep life advice. It is the line Morty says to Summer in Season 1, Episode 8, Ricksty Minutes, when she is upset and threatening to run away from home. Morty tells her that nobody belongs anywhere. Nobody exists on purpose. Everybody is going to die. And then he asks her to come watch TV. People love this quote. They treat it like it is comforting, like Morty has figured out some great truth about the universe and is sharing it with his sister out of kindness. But if you have been following this essay from the beginning, you know that this line is not wisdom. It is damage. Morty is not a philosopher in this moment. He is a traumatized kid who buried his own body in the backyard 2 episodes ago and has not told anyone about it except Summer in this very scene. He is repeating the lesson Rick taught him. Nothing matters, so stop feeling things about it. And this is the beginning of a transformation that plays out across the entire series. Morty starts the show as someone who believes in things. He believes in right and wrong. He believes in helping people. He believes that his actions matter and that the world makes sense, even if it is scary. But season by season, experience by experience, that belief system gets chipped away. And what replaces it is something that looks more and more like Rick's view of the universe. Nothing means anything. Everyone is replaceable. And the only rational response to existence is to stop caring. Let us track how this actually happens across the seasons. In Season 1, Morty is pure. He is scared of everything. He does not want to go on adventures. He tries to do the right thing even when it is dangerous. In Me Seeks and Destroy, he begs Rick to let him lead an adventure and picks a fantasy world because he wants to prove that adventures can be fun without being traumatizing. When King Jellybean attacks him in the bathroom, Morty is shaken, but he finishes the adventure because he wants to prove his point. This is a kid who still believes that good things can happen if you try hard enough. By the end of Season 1, after burying his own body and delivering that famous line to Summer, the first crack has appeared. Morty now knows something that most people never have to face, that his existence is replaceable, that there are infinite versions of him, that the family sitting in the living room is not really his family. But at this point, the damage is still fresh. It has not fully settled into his bones yet. He is still mostly the anxious, good-hearted kid he started as. Season 2 is where the cracks start to spread. Look Who's Purging Now reveals the rage we talked about earlier. Morty goes on a killing spree and discovers, even if he will not admit it, that there is violence inside him that has nothing to do with candy bars. He also starts to push back against Rick more openly. He is less willing to just go along with whatever Rick wants. But he is still operating from a place of morality. He still cares about right and wrong. He insists on saving Arthricia during the purge because it is the right thing to do, even though it blows up in his face. Season 3 is the turning point. This is the season where Morty stops being the scared kid and starts becoming something harder. In the Rick Shank Rickdemption, Morty is angry. He is furious at Rick for abandoning the family. He nearly kills Rick when he thinks Summer is in danger. In Morty's Mind Blowers, he discovers the room of erased memories and nearly takes his own life when the truth becomes too much. In the ABCs of Beth, he tells his own mother to her face that she sucks up to Rick and drives everyone away. This is not the Morty from the pilot. This is a kid who has been hurt so many times that he is starting to fight back. And the way he fights back is by telling hard truths that nobody wants to hear. Season 3 also gives us rest and Ricklaxation, which we just covered. Morty now believes his own empathy is toxic. His worldview has shifted from, I want to be good, to, being good is what gets me hurt. That is a massive change. That is the foundation of the nihilism that is about to take over. Season 4 takes things further. In Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Rick Pete, Morty becomes obsessed with a death crystal that shows him a future where he dies holding Jessica's hand. He is so desperate for this one vision of happiness that he lets Rick die and goes on a rampage across dimensions, hurting innocent people along the way just to chase the possibility of a good ending. This is Morty operating from a place of total selfishness for the first time. He is no longer trying to help anyone. He is trying to get the one thing he wants, and he does not care who gets hurt in the process. Then comes the Vat of Acid episode, later in Season 4. Morty uses the save device recklessly, pulling pranks, testing boundaries, and eventually falling in love only to lose everything. By the time Rick reveals the truth about the device, Morty is hollow. He is not angry anymore. He is not sad. He is just empty. He accepts Rick's cruelty because he does not have the energy to fight it. This is what prolonged exposure to meaninglessness does to a person. It does not make you angry forever. Eventually, it just makes you tired. Season 5 shows Morty at his most aggressive. He kills the Tina Tears to free Planetina. He loses Planetina and sobs on his bed. He watches Rick try to leave him in Forgetting Sarek Mortshaw and is heartbroken. But then in Rick Mirai Jack, when evil Morty offers Morty a chance to escape Rick and the entire system that has been exploiting Mortys across the multiverse, Morty refuses. He chooses Rick. He sides with the person who has hurt him the most because, at this point, Rick is all he knows. The toxic bond is so deep that even when someone offers Morty a way out, he cannot take it. He has internalized Rick's worldview so completely that a universe without Rick feels more terrifying than a universe with him. Season 6 opens with Solarix, where a portal malfunction sends Morty back to the Cronenberg dimension, his original home. The family he left behind, the Smiths who survived in the wasteland of monsters, are hostile and dangerous when Morty returns. The place he came from no longer wants him. And when Morty gets back to Rick, he says something that captures exactly where his nihilism has landed. He tells Rick that he considers Rick his actual grandfather. Not Rick Prime, who is Morty's biological grandfather, Rick C137, the man who adopted him by replacing a dead version of himself in another dimension. Morty has accepted the lie as his truth. He has chosen the man who breaks him over the reality that bore him. And then Season 8 gives us Summer of All Fears, where 17 years of simulated war leave Morty with PTSD so severe that he tries to destroy a power grid. In his solution at the end, have the memories erased. Go back to not knowing. The cycle continues. If you line up all of these moments in order, you can see the trajectory as clearly as a line on a graph. Season 1 Morty would never kill anyone. Season 3 Morty would kill to defend his sister. Season 5 Morty would kill to protect a relationship. Season 8 Morty carries the weight of wars he fought in a fake world and deals with it by erasing his own mind. The nihilism did not arrive all at once. It crept in, one trauma at a time, one lie at a time, one erased memory at a time. Until the kid who once said, "Aw, geez" to everything became someone who can look at the destruction of an entire dimension and shrug. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And if that trajectory sounds familiar, if it sounds like someone else on this show, that is because it is. Because the person Morty is slowly becoming is the person who broke him in the first place. And the mirror between Morty and Rick is something the show has been building toward from the very beginning. That is exactly where we are headed next. Section 11. Becoming What Broke You. The mirror between Morty and Rick. We have spent 10 sections building toward this moment. We have watched Morty go from an anxious, stuttering kid who could barely talk to a girl in his math class to a desensitized, violent, emotionally hardened teenager who can kill without blinking and accept having his memories erased like it is a normal Tuesday. We have tracked every step of that journey. The buried body, the neglectful parents, Rick's abuse, the stolen memories, the rage, the destroyed relationships, the growing belief that nothing matters and nobody belongs anywhere. And now, we need to face the thing the show has been quietly telling us since the very first season. Morty is becoming Rick. Not the genius part. Morty is not suddenly building portal guns or outsmarting galactic governments. But the emotional core of who Rick is, the nihilism, the detachment, the willingness to use violence as a first response, the inability to maintain healthy relationships, the habit of running from pain instead of facing it, all of those things are showing up in Morty more and more with every passing season, and the show is not being subtle about it. Let us start with the most basic comparison. Rick Sanchez is, by almost every measure, a broken person. He is the smartest being in the universe, and he is also one of the most miserable. He drinks constantly. He pushes away everyone who cares about him. He uses sarcasm and cruelty as shields to keep people from getting close. He has been through his own catastrophic trauma, the murder of his wife Diane and his original daughter Beth by Rick Prime, and instead of processing that pain, he spent decades building weapons, hunting for revenge, and numbing himself with alcohol and adventure. Rick's response to his own suffering was to decide that nothing matters, that feelings are weaknesses, that the universe is chaos, and the only rational way to exist in it is to stop caring. And for the first few seasons of the show, Morty is the opposite of this. Morty cares about everything. He cares about Jessica, he cares about his family, he cares about the aliens they meet on adventures. He is Rick's moral counterweight, the kid who says, "We should help that person," when Rick says, "Who cares?" But season by season, that counterweight gets lighter, and the show tracks this transformation with incredible precision. Go back to the pilot. When Rick takes Morty to Dimension 35C and Morty breaks both his legs, Morty screams and cries and begs for help. He is terrified. Pain is new to him. Danger is overwhelming. He is a normal kid reacting to an abnormal situation in a completely normal way. Now jump forward to Season 5. When Morty kills the Tina Tears to free Planetina, there is no screaming. There is no hesitation. He walks into the situation, does what he believes needs to be done, and walks out. He bites off a man's finger. He uses a ring of fire to burn someone alive. And while he is clearly motivated by love rather than cruelty, the cold efficiency of how he handles it is something that would feel right at home in a Rick Sanchez scene. Or look at how Morty handles death. In Season 1, burying his own alternate self in the backyard nearly breaks him. He sits on the couch with a 1,000-yard stare, shell-shocked, unable to speak. By Season 4, in the Vat of Acid episode, he is pressing a button that, unknown to him, is killing alternate versions of himself across the multiverse, and he is doing it to pull pranks and retry conversations with girls. The weight of death has gotten lighter for Morty. It does not crush him the way it used to. And that is exactly how Rick treats death. For Rick, death is an inconvenience. People die, realities collapse, entire civilizations get wiped out, and Rick shrugs and moves on. Morty is not there yet, but he is walking in that direction. The show makes this parallel explicit in several key moments. One of the most important is in the Rickshank Rickdemption, the Season 3 premiere. Rick has been gone for months, locked up in a Galactic Federation prison. When he comes back, Morty is not grateful. He is angry. He confronts Rick about abandoning the family, and when it looks like Rick might be threatening Summer, Morty grabs a weapon and comes very close to killing him. This is a huge moment because it shows that Morty has developed something that Rick has in abundance: the willingness to use violence against someone he loves if he believes it is necessary. That is not a Morty trait. That is a Rick trait, and Morty has picked it up through years of observation and experience. Then there is Morty Night Run from Season 2, where Morty insists on rescuing an alien being called Fart from assassination. Morty fights Rick on this. He is determined to save this creature because killing it would be wrong. But by the end of the episode, Morty discovers that Fart plans to destroy all carbon-based life in the universe. So Morty kills Fart himself. He does the thing he spent the entire episode fighting against. And while you could argue that this was the right call, the important thing is how it changes Morty. He went into that adventure believing that life is sacred and killing is always wrong. He came out of it having killed someone with his own hands. That gap between the belief and the action is where Morty starts to lose himself. And it is a gap Rick crossed a long time ago. The show also draws the parallel through how both characters handle relationships. Rick pushes people away. He sabotages his connections with Bird Person, with Unity, with his own daughter, Beth. Every time someone gets close to Rick, he finds a way to destroy the bond before it can be used against him. And what do we see Morty doing in Rest and Ricklaxation? When the toxic parts of his personality are removed, healthy Morty becomes someone who uses people and discards them. He takes Jessica on a date and then tells her he would get bored with her. He moves on to the next girl without a second thought. That is Rick's pattern. Love them, leave them. Never let them close enough to cause real pain. Morty has not fully adopted this approach yet. He still falls in love. He still cries when Planetina leaves. He still grieves the unnamed girlfriend from the Vat of Acid episode. But the show keeps showing us what Morty could become if the trauma continues. And that future version of Morty looks exactly like Rick. The Ricklantis Mix-Up, Season 3, Episode 7, takes this idea even further by showing us what happens to other Mortys across the multiverse. The Citadel of Ricks is an interdimensional society populated by thousands of alternate Ricks and Mortys. And in this society, Mortys are second-class citizens. They are used as shields, as servants, as tools. They are exploited by every Rick they encounter. And out of this system of abuse, one Morty rose up and became something terrifying. Evil Morty, later known as President Morty. Evil Morty is the ultimate version of what happens when a Morty stops being a victim and starts playing by Rick's rules. He is cold, calculating, manipulative, and willing to kill thousands to achieve his goals. He manipulated the entire Citadel into electing him as president. He slaughtered Ricks and Mortys alike to build a device that would let him escape the central finite curve, the barrier Rick C-137 built to keep all realities contained within a system where Rick is always the smartest person alive. Evil Morty looked at the system that was designed to exploit him and decided to burn it all down. Now, our Morty is not Evil Morty. The show makes that clear. In Rick Mirai Jack, when Evil Morty offers our Morty a chance to escape with him, Morty refuses. He chooses to stay with Rick. But the fact that Evil Morty exists at all is the show's way of asking a question. What is the final destination of Morty's current path? If you take a good-hearted kid and subject him to enough trauma, enough manipulation, enough betrayal, what does he become? Evil Morty is one possible answer, and it is not a comforting one. Even without becoming Evil Morty, our Morty shows Rick-like behavior that would have been unthinkable in Season 1. In Season 5, when Rick tries to leave Morty in forgetting Sarek Mortshaw, Morty does not just accept it sadly. He goes to extreme lengths to get Rick back, including bonding with a portal fluid stain that leads him on a dangerous side adventure. When that does not work, he shows up at the Citadel in Rick Mirai Jack, still trying to reconnect with Rick. This desperation, this inability to walk away from someone who hurts you, is something Rick himself displays in his obsession with finding Rick Prime. Rick spent decades chasing the man who killed his family, unable to let go, unable to move on. Morty is now doing the same thing with Rick. He is chasing the person who hurts him because he cannot imagine a life without him. The show also mirrors them through their approaches to pain. Rick drinks. He numbs himself with alcohol and reckless behavior. Morty, increasingly, numbs himself through different means. He agrees to have his memories erased after Summer of All Fears. He uses the save device in the Vat of Acid episode to avoid consequences. He buries his feelings after losing Planetina and goes back to normal life like nothing happened. Different methods, same strategy. Do not feel the pain. Push it down. Keep moving. One of the most insightful critical observations about the show came from a writer who described the Smith family's happiness as a thin layer of ice over a bottomless well of traumatized rage that Morty is barely keeping down. That image works perfectly for both Morty and Rick. Rick's entire personality is a thin layer of genius-level confidence over a bottomless well of grief, guilt, and self-hatred. And Morty is building the exact same structure inside himself. A surface that says, "I'm fine," covering a depth that says, "I am falling apart." This is the tragedy at the heart of Rick and Morty.
The show is not just telling a story about a grandfather and grandson going on wacky adventures. It is telling a story about how trauma moves from one generation to the next. Rick was broken by the loss of his family. His brokenness led him to treat Morty in ways that are now breaking Morty. And unless something changes, Morty will grow up to break someone else the same way. The cycle continues. The damage passes down. And the worst part is that neither of them can see it clearly enough to stop it. Rick cannot see it because seeing it would require him to admit what he has done to Morty. And Morty cannot see it because seeing it would require him to admit that the person he loves most in the world is also the person who is destroying him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the show is not done with Morty's story. 8 seasons in, the cycle is still turning. And the question the show keeps asking, the question it has been building toward since Morty buried his own body in that backyard, is whether this cycle can ever be broken. Whether Morty can find a way out. Whether the damage is permanent. Or whether there is still enough of that anxious, empathetic, good-hearted kid left inside him to turn things around. That is the question we need to answer in our final section. Section 12. The cycle of trauma. Can Morty break free, or is he already gone? We have come a long way. 11 sections, thousands of words. We started with a nervous 14-year-old boy who could barely talk to a girl in his math class, and we have tracked him through buried bodies, stolen memories, violent rampages, destroyed relationships, and the slow, painful erosion of everything that once made him good. We have watched Morty Smith go from the picture of childhood innocence to someone who carries the weight of more trauma than most adults could survive. And now we are at the final question, the one the entire show has been building toward, the one that does not have an easy answer. Can Morty break the cycle, or is he already gone? To answer that, we need to look at what the show has given us. Not what we hope will happen or what we think should happen, but what the actual evidence across 8 seasons tells us about where Morty is headed. And the honest answer is that the evidence points in 2 directions at once. Let us start with the case that Morty is already gone, that the damage is done and cannot be undone. There is plenty of evidence for this reading of the character. We have tracked a clear line of escalation across every season. Season 1 Morty could not handle seeing violence. Season 2 Morty committed violence and was ashamed. Season 3 Morty committed violence and needed a lie to cope with it. Season 5 Morty committed brutal, calculated violence to get what he wanted. Season 8 Morty carried the scars of simulated war and chose to have his memories erased rather than deal with the pain. That trajectory does not curve upward, it goes down. Each season, Morty loses a little more of the things that made him who he was. His innocence is gone. His belief that the world makes sense is gone. His trust in his own feelings, as we saw in Rest and Ricklaxation, is so damaged that he considers his own empathy a disease. And perhaps most importantly, every time Morty has a chance to break away from Rick, every time the universe offers him an exit, he cannot take it. In Rick Mirai Jack, evil Morty escapes a central finite curve entirely. He breaks free from the system that exploits Mortys across the multiverse. He leaves Rick behind. And when he offers our Morty the chance to come with him, Morty refuses. He stays with Rick.
He stays with the person who has spent years breaking him down, because Morty no longer knows who he is without Rick. His identity has become so tied to their relationship that leaving feels like dying. That is not the behavior of someone who is on the path to recovery. That is the behavior of someone who is trapped. And then there is the memory erasure at the end of Summer of All Fears. After 17 years of simulated war,
After PTSD so severe that a shattered beer bottle sends him into a panic. After trying to destroy a power grid in a rage, Morty chooses to have it all erased. He goes back to being a normal teenager with no memory of what happened. On the surface, this looks like healing, but we know from Morty's mind blowers that erasure is not healing, it is avoidance. It is Rick's solution, not a real one. And by choosing it, Morty is once again following Rick's playbook. When something hurts, make it disappear. Do not face it. Do not learn from it. Just delete it and move on. The case that Morty is already gone gets even stronger when you consider what we learned about his self-image in Rest and Ricklaxation. Morty believes his best qualities are his worst qualities. He thinks his kindness is weakness. He thinks his empathy is a burden. He thinks his need for love and connection is the thing that keeps getting him hurt. And if that is how Morty sees himself, then every future trauma will only push him further in the direction of becoming the cold, detached, Rick-like version of himself that the detox machine showed us. The scared little boy inside Morty is not just being ignored. He is being actively rejected by Morty himself. So that is the dark reading. Morty is on an unstoppable path toward becoming Rick 2.0. The cycle cannot be broken because Morty does not even realize he is in one. He thinks he is coping. He thinks he is adapting. He thinks the numbness and the violence and the nihilism are signs that he is getting stronger. But they are not. They are signs that he is disappearing. But there is another reading, and the show, to its credit, has not closed the door on it. Because for all the damage Morty has taken, for all the ways he has changed, there are moments scattered across every season where the original Morty, the anxious, empathetic, good-hearted kid from the pilot, is still visible. And those moments matter. In Solarix, the Season 6 premiere, when the portal system breaks down and sends everyone back to their original dimensions, Morty ends up back in the Cronenberg dimension he abandoned in Season 1. He faces the family he left behind. He sees what his departure did to them. And when he gets back to Rick, he does something that a truly nihilistic person would never do. He tells Rick that he considers him his actual grandfather. Not because it is logical, not because it is rational, but because Morty still believes in family. He still values connection. He still chooses love over nothing, even after everything he has been through. In Forgetting Sarek Mortshall, when Rick decides to leave Morty behind, Morty does not shrug and move on the way a Rick would. He is heartbroken. He goes to extreme lengths to get Rick back. Yes, this shows how deep the toxic bond goes, but it also shows something else. It shows that Morty still feels things deeply. He has not gone numb. The pain of losing Rick is real to him because love is still real to him. A person who has truly given up on caring does not chase after the person who left them. They let them go. And then there is the Planetina scene at the end of A Rick Convenient Mort. After everything Morty does to free Planetina, after killing the Tina Tears and fighting for her freedom, he has to let her go when she crosses a moral line he cannot follow. And the way he reacts is telling. He does not stuff the pain down. He does not crack a nihilistic joke. He sits on his bed and cries. Hard. Ugly. Real crying. The kind that comes from a place of genuine feeling. And Beth, hearing him through the door, walks away without going in, which tells us something about her parenting, but also tells us something about Morty. He is still capable of grief.
He is still capable of mourning the loss of love. That capacity has not been destroyed. Even in Total Recall, Season 2, Episode 4, there is a moment that speaks to who Morty really is underneath all the damage. In this episode, alien parasites have infiltrated the Smith house by implanting false positive memories in the family's minds.
The family figures out that real people are associated with negative memories, not just good ones, because real relationships involve pain. And when Morty needs to determine whether Rick is real, he does not think of the adventures or the fun times, he thinks of all the negative memories. Rick's drunken rages, the times Morty nearly died, the abuse and the fear and the danger. And those negative memories prove Rick is real. Morty's pain is proof of the relationship's authenticity. And the fact that Morty carries all of that pain and still chooses to stay with Rick is not just a sign of a toxic bond. It is also a sign that Morty understands something deep about love that Rick himself may not. Real love includes pain, and that does not make it less real. The Rick and Morty wiki notes that, in spite of all the physical and mental trauma Rick has put him through, Morty still considers Rick his grandfather and his friend. And Season 5 confirms that Morty is starting to grow sick and tired of Rick's constant insults and is far more willing to stand up in defense of himself. That pushback matters. Morty is not passively absorbing the abuse anymore. He is fighting it. He is naming it. And the fact that he can recognize Rick's behavior as wrong means that some part of his moral compass is still working. So where does this leave us? Is Morty going to break the cycle or not? The honest answer is that the show has not told us yet, and I think that is intentional. Because the real argument of Rick and Morty is not that trauma always destroys people, and it is not that trauma can always be overcome. The argument is more complicated and more true to life than either of those simple stories. The argument is that trauma changes you. Period. There is no version of Morty that comes out of these 8 seasons unchanged. The boy from the pilot is gone. He is not coming back. The innocence that was taken from him, through the Cronenberg disaster, through the memory erasure, through the violence and the betrayal and the loss, that innocence cannot be restored. What happened to Morty happened. And pretending it did not, which is what Rick keeps trying to do with the memory device, does not heal anything. It just delays the collapse. But the show also argues that being changed by trauma is not the same thing as being destroyed by it. Morty is different from who he was in Season 1. He is harder. He is angrier. He is more cynical. But he is also more capable. He is more willing to stand up for himself. He is more aware of how Rick manipulates him. And in certain moments, he is more emotionally honest than anyone else in his family. When Morty cries over Planetina, he is doing something that Rick has never been able to do: feel his pain in real time without running from it. The question is not whether Morty has been damaged. He has. The question is whether the damage defines him, or whether he can build something new on top of it. And the show keeps giving us just enough evidence in both directions to make the answer uncertain. That is what makes Morty Smith one of the most compelling characters in modern animation. He is not a hero who overcomes his trauma through willpower and a good attitude. He is not a villain who becomes a monster because of what was done to him. He is something much more realistic and much more painful. He is a kid who is doing his best with a situation that no kid should ever have to face. Sometimes his best looks like courage. Sometimes it looks like violence. Sometimes it looks like nihilism. And sometimes it looks like sitting on a bed and sobbing because he loves someone and lost them, and there is nobody in his life who knows how to help him carry that weight. We started this essay with a thesis. Morty Smith was not born broken. He was systematically broken by parental neglect, Rick's emotional abuse, and the accumulated weight of traumas that no child should have to carry. Across 8 seasons, those experiences eroded his innocence, warped his moral compass, and slowly reshaped him into a reflection of the person who damaged him most. But the show's unflinching honesty about how childhood trauma works means that it refuses to give us a clean ending. Morty is not saved. He is not lost. He is somewhere in between,
carrying his damage into everything he does, fighting to hold on to the parts of himself that still feel and care and love, even as those parts get smaller and harder to find. And maybe that is the most honest thing the show has ever said about trauma. It does not end. It does not resolve in a single moment of clarity or a single act of bravery. It just becomes part of who you are. And the only question that matters is what you do with it. Whether Morty will answer that question, whether the show will give him a chance to break free, or whether it will follow the cycle to its darkest conclusion, is something only future seasons can tell us. But one thing is certain. After 8 seasons of watching this kid get knocked down, torn apart, lied to, erased, and rebuilt, the fact that there is still a part of Morty that reaches for love, that fights for connection, that cries when it hurts, means that the boy from the pilot is not completely gone. He is buried, but unlike the body in the backyard, he might still be breathing. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.